Hi, my name is Roukaya, and throughout this presentation, I will be focusing on a current important and relevant educational issue, which is the use of government funding within Australian government and non-government schools. Public schools across Australia are funded by the federal government through the Funding Assurance Framework. This framework sets out rules and regulations in order to make sure that organisations are using funds appropriately and in accordance with the Australian Education Act 2013. Rules and regulations of the assurance program are put in place to make sure that the Australian government funding for schools is being appropriately spent in accordance with the requirements of the Act and regulation. Their approved authorities are assisted and encouraged to become compliant and to stay compliant. Non-compliance is identified and also addressed. Approved authorities are not unreasonably burdened by compliance or forced to bear unreasonable cost of compliance. Systemic compliance issues are identified so that policies and processes can be amended to remedy issues. The funding of schools within Australia have been a topic of debate for some time now. Many people believe that not all schools receive the same amount of funding. People are under the impression that certain schools are given more money, especially within the private school sector. Another very common issue with the funding of the education system is the idea that not enough money is spent on resources and teacher training. This is important in order to better the learning experience for future generations. This is an issue due to the fact that the underfunding towards certain schools reflects an unethical educational system where some students are considered privileged due to having access to greater resources due to higher funding. The concept of race, religion, and culture can also play a part in the issue of unethical funding to students from disadvantaged and minority groups and areas. This is an issue because these students are prone to miss out on greater opportunities caused by the lack of funds for better resources and teacher education. Today it seems that government funding is benefiting private schools more than the public system. The fact that students who attend private schools are required to pay a tuition already puts public schools at a disadvantage. Frankel discusses how schools, regardless of whether they are public or private, aim to emphasize a can-do attitude, which allows students to aim high. Although students from minority and disadvantaged groups continue to suffer with gaining a greater level of education. The previous government and former Prime Minister Ms. Julia Gillard decided that changes to school funding needed to be made. David Gonski was chairman and was given an opportunity to make recommendations regarding the educational funding of Australian schools. Throughout his research, Gonski discovered an imbalance of funding across the schooling sectors made by the federal government. The application of the Gonski reform meant that the government was recommended to reduce excessive payments to schools that didn't need them and redirect funds to those that did. Most importantly, schools which were suffering from disadvantage, whether it be due to location, for example the schools in rural areas, will be able to receive more funding from the government. In order to benefit children from future generations, the concept of public versus private schools should not exist anymore. This way, all schools will be required to receive the same amount of funding from the government. Also, the training required for teachers will be the same across all boards. Wasserman and Hanushek have argued that students who come from countries where there is no differentiation between public and private perform significantly better than students from schools which were private and public. This is due to the fact that schools from each sector were not receiving different funds. Treating non-government schools differently to government schools is unfair, said the ABC in 2013. Thank you.